This is the most important video you'll ever watch. Just being real. If you've watched any of my videos, you already know that God left way more clues about the time we live in than most of us ever had a clue about. But this video? This is the most time-sensitive, freakishly thrilling little bit of data I have literally ever come across. And I cannot wait to share this with you. And of course, I've got some happy joy for you. But before I lay it out for you, this one's going to need a disclaimer. Number one, don't believe me. I am a voice on your screen. I could be AI for all you know, but I'm not. Still, your knowledge of and relationship with the one and only God is way too important to trust to any mere human. Study the Bible for yourself and ask God your questions. There are no shortcuts if you want to know that you know the real truth. Number two, as we get closer to biblical events that are closer to things on our personal calendars, this subject can get a little touchy for some. It may prompt some very good questions that are just a little over my head. So I've done the work of gathering some special resources of people you can get accurate answers from on this topic. They're in the description. And last but not least, number three, I'd rather be a target test dummy for the military's new armed drones than to put all this work into some stupid righteous gemstone shock and awe video that was all flash and no substance. So, I wouldn't touch this subject with a 10-foot pole if I did not believe that what I'm about to tell you is totally biblically correct. Deal? All right, let's get to it. God says every single word in his Bible comes directly from his voice, is literally true, and is of equal importance for anybody who wants to know him. But did you know that God also said there are some things in the Bible that literally no one would ever understand unless they were living in our time right now? Unfortunately, many churches have completely avoided the subject of the end, simply because they weren't living in the end. And that's caused millions of Christ followers to be clueless to what God gave us that we really need to make it through the end. Jesus said we are supposed to be actively looking for the signs of the seasons, or the end. He also said that when we got to the end, all that stuff that didn't make sense to other people, so they didn't bother talking about it, would make really good sense to us. That's how we know we're in. Yes. But wouldn't we just be happier if we didn't talk about the, No. What God put in the Bible about today keeps our focus on our home, not this temporary stop we're on earth. It helps us retain our identity as residents of heaven and keeps us from becoming like the locals. It grounds our joy because when we view the times we live in through the Bible, we can see just how close we are to our homecoming. And all of that should change everything about your life for the good. The Bible is the most complete history document ever. It tells us how it started, how it will end in graphic detail, and how to know the end is really here. In the Bible, we have 2,000 specific prophecies that have been 100% fulfilled hundreds to thousands of years after they were promised, as proof of where we are on God's timeline. If you want to dig deeper into that, check out The Coming Convergence. It's a documentary that came out in 2017. It's chock full of some really interesting information for today. But as I was watching it, I was thinking about how much has happened just since 2017. As of 2017, when they made the documentary, there were 500 end-time prophecies yet to be fulfilled. And most of these are going to take place during the last 7 years on Earth. But just in that last 5 years, that number has been heading steadily down as archaeology has been finding more proof of fulfilled prophecy than at any other time on Earth. And now it looks like two biggies may be right around the corner. Now, in and of themselves, signs of either of these things wouldn't mean anything because we know a couple of things have to come first, like historic weather events that start to become more often and bigger, and signs that the actual globe is beginning to rumble to life, getting ready for those massive earthquakes and volcanoes that will occur in the last 7 years. Dutchsinse is a meteorologist who has a YouTube channel. He's been charting the changes that no one's talking about in the geographical plates and watching as they all start to begin to crack open. All these little fires you keep hearing about, he shows them actually showing up on the satellite maps. Just like God said. Well, check and check. So that's why these two stories take on a whole new importance to you and me. The Bible tells us there are two big prophecies that we know are coming either just before or just after the rapture. Nobody knows for sure. But the possibility now exists that we could even see a 2-for-1 coming very soon. The first one has to do with the 10 horns. I've already covered the 10 horns in this video, and definitely watch that if you haven't. But here are the cliff notes. God says a global group of 10 leaders is going to come forward to lead the global transition that he told us was coming. Prophecy also mentions 10 lands. Now, we already know that the globe was divided into the 10 regions the Bible talks about in 2009. But what most people don't know is that the same year, a brand new global intergovernmental organization was founded to choose world leaders. We know them as BRICS. BRICS has only had 5 leaders up until 2022, but they've just announced that they've identified and will be naming the 5 remaining global leaders in August of 23. Could this be the 10 horns? Dun, dun, dun. We don't know when the 10 horns appear, but the majority of Bible scholars put this just before to just after the rapture. Again, they're not God. They're just looking at the timeline and, making best guesses. So while the Bible doesn't tell us exactly when it happens, although we have a time frame, it says that they will be in place for a short time. And then a new leader will rise up, and they'll give over complete control to him. Now, many prophecy teachers think that the confusion after the rapture could be the event that causes them to name a single unifying leader. And that's also why this next article is of particular interest. All of us Christ followers will be out of here when the Antichrist or the fake Savior is revealed. The Bible does tell us that. But the event that officially begins the biblical tribulation is when the Antichrist announces a global peace treaty for 7 years. Most of the world is going to see this as the ultimate success of Agenda 2030, the long-awaited world peace. Maybe he even saves the planet. I don't know. But what we do know is that everyone is going to love this guy. Of course, only halfway through this soon-coming utopia, if a global crackdown is your idea of a utopia, he shows his true self, and the tribulation gets real bad real fast for the last 3.5 years. And this brings us to the last news story. The United Nations just announced a 7-year push to usher in all of the changes that will put us smack dab in the middle of the biblical beast system. So in other words, if they complete this during their planned time, we would be prophetically at the place where the Antichrist could announce his 7 years of official peace by September 2030, which ironically is the month of the Feast of Trumpets, a Jewish festival tied to the return of Christ. It's officially time to guard your smarts. Now, there are going to be a ton of guesses coming, but we can narrow down the real possibilities from, the junk by getting into the Bible for ourselves and praying for wisdom. But simple rule number 1 is just ignore anything that names specific dates for the rapture or the return of Christ. Again, a biblical no-no. So now that we're seeing what the Bible calls the birth pains in historic weather events and the increasing earthquakes and volcanoes around the geographical plates, the announcement of 10 world leaders and a specific time at which the 7-year peace could happen, especially when those things are all targeted in the next few years, well, that brings us to happy joy time. If you're a Christ follower, you can now know, not just hope, that today's events are exactly what God said would happen right before he harpazos us. Now there's a word you should memorize. All of the Bible criteria for the best moment you could ever dream of has already been met. We are literally watching the pieces for the events after our departure beginning to take place on the world stage. And while we could still be here through more of the setup events, we are quickly closing in on certain things that the Bible says we will not be here for, like the introduction of the Antichrist and the handover of power from the 10 global leaders. Only God knows the date and the time, but he doesn't call the end times birth pains for nothing. If you just look at the speeding up of events, this world is no longer having Braxton Hicks contractions. It is headed straight for very hard labor. And I get the feeling that we are very, very close to the rapture of the church. There is nothing here on earth that can steal from us what God has prepared. Not that weird spiritual battle you may be going through, and I am also going through one of my life's biggest assortment of odd and unusual evil attacks, so I get it. Not even the advent of World War III. Right now, the heavens are buzzing with the gathering of the crowd of those in Christ that have gone before us, and maybe a few faces you know too. The biggest celebration ever is now ready for us. The band is tuning up, and the second that last trumpet blows, God is going to give his son the nod to do what he has been waiting to do for over 2,000 years. To instantly swoop down and snatch us up from the edge of worldwide disaster and deliver us in the same instant to the ultimate reunion party. Want to know what the party looks like? Watch this one. The Bible tells us so much about what's coming in the next several years. But Satan also knows the Bible, probably better than anyone else. Now, he still thinks he can win, but he also knows he has to make his game plan fit God's timeline. So, given everything in the Bible that seems to land around 2030, it's no mistake that the world leaders are fixated on that year too. Somewhere in there, we've got to have a 7-year tribulation that happens after God's people are gone. I mean, the math alone says we're running out of time. If you're not a follower of Christ, and I don't mean if you don't call yourself a Christian or believe Jesus was a real person, I mean if you don't know that you've chosen Jesus Christ as the leader of your own life. If that's you, time on this earth is not going to get any less scary because the window is closing. True justice for all the evil that has ever happened since the beginning of the world is waiting like a wild bull just banging the gates before they're sprung. But as of now, there is still time. It doesn't matter if you started ignoring God at some point or just never listened to that voice that kept whispering while you were too busy. The God of the Bible literally is love. He's everything you know as good or loving or pure, and he's holding back the tide because he's still waiting for you. You don't need a church, a religious ceremony, or any special words. Just talk to God however you want. He's heard it all, trust me. He's talked to me. Read about him in his word and don't stop talking to him. If people without a Bible can find the God of the Bible, pretty sure he can overcome any obstacles you have too. And if you've grown disinterested in God throughout your life, and given enough time and circumstance, religion will do that to you, consider that maybe the God you were told about wasn't who God ever really was. Religions have gotten it wrong more than almost anyone. Pure love is God. Total forgiveness is God. A compassion so personal that he would and did die for you. That's God. But God is also pure justice. And if it weren't for the bridge of Christ, we'd all be left behind when real justice comes. If you really want this world, God will let you have it on your own terms. But he told you it was going to be like hell in a handbasket because he didn't want to leave you behind. I started this YouTube channel because I'm a functionally homebound disabled person. I don't have a lot of opportunities to get out, to connect with other people, and to share God. But then God reminded me I don't live in the 1800s. And neither do you. Let's take advantage of the time we've got left in this incredibly advanced time on earth and use all of our resources to remind people that God is real, that the time is short, that the evidence exists. I put a lot of resources down in the description that we can all use to learn more, to grow closer to God, and to make sure that we know the times that we live in. And I want you to know that I really do pray for you each day, for the unique struggles you're facing, And I pray that God will take you by the hand and lead you through the fog of today's storms. Jesus is waiting for the nod from his Father. As soon as he gets it, he'll be here. Think on that. It's coming soon. I'll be looking for you at the wedding supper of the Lamb on the other side.